Hello, I'm Del with Healing Frequencies Music, and the topic of this video with the slide PowerPoint presentation is taking a look at colors with musical frequencies, concert pitches, temperament, and showing how they work together. And for this, I am wearing a color palette that someone said are really good colors for me to wear. So it was a scarf that was given showing which ones make me look good. So if we think about that, as I go into this presentation, ponder all of the colors that you just adore a lot and that just make you happy. We want to do the same thing with music. So I'm going to start by using a presentation to show how music can be whatever you want it to be. It's based on your intent and how you feel music, and no two people are the same. So the way you feel music and the way I feel music are going to be different because your life experiences are different than mine. A song that might mean a lot to you, it's like when you get married and you remember your first song that you listened to together. It's going to have way more meaning to you than that same song would mean for me. A lot of the music that we like has an emotional attachment to it. There's nothing wrong with that. All I'm saying is music tends to be a very emotional experience, and it is a gateway for us to stepping into healing, as an example, and a variety of other things, calming us down. There's plenty of scientific scientific studies to prove that music is healing, which is how I began this process of creating healing music. But before I get too far into that, I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get this slide presentation going. Here goes. Let's start from the beginning. It's a very good place to start, as you know. The title of this one is called Temperament, Tuning, and Colors. Tuning practices. What does music history tell us about tuning? And I think before I'm going to move my cute little picture up here so that we can read everything. Vocalists don't consider temperaments or concert pitch because they can match any instrument. It's just simply matching, listening to the accompaniment so that they can sing in tune with it. Every musical instrument requires tuning, including those from ancient times, which you will see here pretty soon. Until the 1800s, concert pitches were regional and sometimes even specific to a town. So there was no standardized concert pitch. That we didn't get that until the 1930s. Before the 1800s, each composer chose which keys they wanted pure and which ones needed more dissonance. When I'm talking about keys, I should specifically say notes on a keyboard instrument, like from C to G. That's a fifth. Did they want that fifth absolutely pure where there was no beating in between it? We call those binaural beats, by the way, slight out of tuneness. Or did they want no beating at all? So when I say pure, I mean no beating wah between the notes. Dissonance was considered color, what they called, it's the music portion of calling it tension and release. In color, it would be slight variations on that color that might not match a color palette. Like there's some color palettes that wouldn't look so great with my scarf because they're not in the tones of the colors of this scarf. Okay. But sometimes this tension, this dissonance was wanted by composers. Until the 1800s, there was no way to measure exact temperaments or concert pitches. I don't care what anybody says. If you don't have a device to measure 440 hertz, how are you going to know that we didn't use 440 before we had a measurement to do it? So anyway, the current concert pitch of A440 was actually a compromise so that musicians across the globe could collaborate with one another. Prior to the standardization, you would have to have a different instrument, if you were a wind player specifically, to go to various countries to play with that particular group. When I went to France in 1988 to participate in a competition, I got a letter, that was way back before, email, saying that they were going to tune the pianos at A442. So to make sure I made those proper adjustments for my clarinet so that I could play at the French pitch, which tends to be slightly higher than American pitch. Recordings in the 1900s also forced the issue of standardized concert pitch and temperament. Why is that? You go listen to a symphony in 3 different keys because it sounded like they were 3 different keys because the different concert pitches all over the world. And so that again is another thing that led to standardizing our concert pitch. Newsflash, no temperament is perfectly in tune. The laws of tuning don't work that way. Musical instrument timeline. So 1500 BCE, this is what we say before the current day. Ancient lyres were discovered from this period. And there's a guy who works at the British Museum who found a Sumerian tablet that showed how to tune them. That tuning shows that they were done in fourths and fifths, just like we tune today. It is the 3rd harmonic on the harmonic series, or in the harmonic series, because the 1st and 2nd harmonic are exact octaves of one another. The 5th is the 3rd harmonic, which is very prominent in all music. So it only makes sense that our natural ears are going to want to tune to that 5th, and the next one after that would be a 4th. That's geeky stuff. We'll save it for later. 70 AD, the instruments that we know were in use at that time were lyres, shofars, percussion, some wind instruments because of ancient writings. Modern notation wasn't invented until 1000 AD, and that was by our friend Guido of Arezzo, of which he did that to help the monks learn the plain chant in a year instead of the usual 10 years that it took, because they had to learn it by rote until they could read music. So between 1000 to 1400 AD, when they mixed instrument groups, they're required, because every instrument is going to tune differently. So they had to be creative with how they began tuning. Enter around 1400 AD, you've got lutes, which are fretted instruments, and early keyboards, the clavichord, the harpsichord, a variety of instruments. Pianos and keyboards are fixed instruments, and you have to find a way to tune them. And so once we got keyboards and lutes thrown into the mix, tuning becomes a nightmare. And I'm not saying that lightly. 1600 AD, all of a sudden now we're adding full strings to the orchestra and some winds. You've got the harpsichord, which is acting as the basso continuo. So you still had to tune to the harpsichord. Even though everyone else could adjust, but the harpsichord, that was the instrument you had to tune to because it was fixed. There could be no other adjustments that were made. 1800 AD, somewhere in the 1800s, this is when the Industrial Revolution hit, which made it possible to systemize instrument making. And from that point forward, all instruments were made in equal temperaments. And I'll explain to you in a bit why that happened. So musical temperament and tuning, this is how it worked. A variety of musical temperaments and concert pitches have been used over the past several hundred years that we know of. Before that, again, what the Sumerian tablets showed that these lyres were tuned in perfect fifths and perfect fourths, but we don't know what notes they tuned, where they were tuned to. And they found ways to do that, but I'm not going to go into that here because it's quite technical. So our current thing is we have decided on the concert pitch of A440. If you're playing a piano, you're stuck with A440 because pianos are made to play in A440. Fretted, any guitars, any strings, not wind instruments can tune to other things. So what they do is they begin the tuning process on the A above middle C. And just so you can hear what that sounds like, well, I'm going to play the octave below middle C. La, la. That's your A that you would tune to on a current keyboard. Before equal temperament, the tuning began at middle C, la, And that happens to be an A440. And they would call that C, they would call that note C based on the church organ, the clock tower, if they had a tuning fork, which didn't come until later on, they would tune to those instruments. And so every region had their own pitch that they used. From this point, so now what we end up doing is we decide on the temperament to tune, which tunes the distance between notes. So you're going to say, okay, I'm going to tune my guitar in 432. Well, I can't, let's not pick the guitar because the guitar can only play in equal temperament unless you have split frets, which I won't get to. But let's go back to keyboards. Let's go back to the harpsichord, because the harpsichord, you can just take one of those things and a tuning wrench and tune it. So let's say we're going to tune a harpsichord and we're going to do just intonation. It's slightly different than equal temperament, but not quite. And I'm going to tune from middle C. Now we do it on the A above middle C, but before equal temperament, they always started on middle C and tuned all the white notes on the keyboard first, because the black notes were tricky. From the starting pitch, you begin tuning fifths until every note within 2 octaves is tuned to the temperament of choice. You begin with tuning at fifths. And then once you've got those basic white keys set, from that point, depending on whether you're going to use well temperament, you're going to use Verkler, just, Pythagorean, whatever temperament, then you're going to adjust all the other notes. Once the initial temperament is set, then all the other octaves on the keyboard, then you're going to tune all the rest of the octaves. Imagine that prior to the Industrial Revolution, this was all done completely by ear. All from one note. They chose the pitch of one note and then tuned the whole keyboard to that one note. That's why there were many different temperaments and concert pitches. It was personal preference. We're going to look at how they might have tuned a keyboard. And because this is, I've seen several videos, it gets really complicated after about the first 10 or 11. So I'll just show you how this works. What you're going to see on this keyboard is I've numbered it 1 through 12. And you're going to notice that all the white keys are tuned first. Then we begin adding sharps and flats. In the early Baroque era, they rarely ever played in more than 1 or 2 sharps or 1 or 2 flats, because once you got beyond that, then it got more and more out of tune. From this point forward, from what I have, the first, I'd say 11 notes, 12 could be, you could go different places from point 12. From this point, depends on the rest of the temperament that's chosen, on how you're going to tune and which notes you're going to do next. Some will tune the major thirds because they really like pure major thirds. That's what just intonation is about, is tuning all the major thirds. That is like C to E or D to F sharp or E to G sharp or F to A. Those are all major thirds. Tuning before equal temperament focused on playing in the keys C, G, D, F, and B flat. And of course, all the modes that went along with that, and the minors that went along with those as well. That's, you know, considering we have 12 keys we can use, that's what, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can count. Anything beyond created more dissonance, which was considered coloring the key. And sometimes composers would write in these funky keys because they liked it slightly out of tune. Our modern ear, we can't, it's even more out of tune than what we have today. All right. For those of us who are visual learners, imagine that we have temperament on a ruler. This is a ruler that's divided into inches or half inches, I think here, or whatever it is. There's 12 marks and they're equally spaced. So if it's equally spaced, they are an equal temperament. And you will notice I have the corresponding colors from the moving nanometers down into the Hertz range of what approximately those note colors might be. You'll notice that C is green and G is red, and a lot of times you will see it backwards, but this is the correct math. All right, this is a picture of a split keyboard from the Baroque era, showing that sharps and flats were not considered the same note. And you will notice that this would be F sharp, and this would be G flat. This would be G sharp. This would be A flat. This would be D sharp, and this would be E flat. And depending on what keys they wanted to play in would depend on which ones they had split keys or not. Comparing notes with their colors. So let's look at that next. On the right, you will see some of the notes are, the picture got cut off a little bit, but you're going to notice that A is orange yellow, A sharp is yellow orange, B flat. Now they're calling B flat and A sharp slightly different. If you look at the pitch, this A sharp, which is 457 hertz, is a lower number than 472.27 hertz, which means this pitch for A sharp is lower than the pitch for B flat. They're slightly different colors. All three of these notes, B sharp and C, are considered the same note now. But you're going to notice that B sharp is 511 hertz, whereas C is 527. They're both greens. They're just in different places on the green spectrum. C flat and B are considered the same note now, but previous to equal temperament, 506 hertz, you can see is higher than 491 hertz. They're so close. They're about a quarter of a step apart. In reality, this is a 21 note scale and loosely tuned, meaning that you're adding in all the quarter tones, splitting up the sharps and flats into what they originally would have been like in the Baroque era. And these are the different colors for those notes. So you remember our temperament ruler that we had before, and that I showed that this is equal temperament: C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B on the way up. On the way down, you flat the notes: B, B flat, A flat, G, G flat, F, E, E flat, D, D flat, C. So on the way up, you sharp the notes, and on the way down, you flat the notes. And this seems completely backwards, because you think if you're sharpening something, it's going to be higher. But if you go back to this slide, right here, you're going to notice again that the sharp notes in every one of these cases is a lower frequency than the flat notes, but they're still, now we've combined these and they're somewhere in between. All right. Now we're going to skip over to this. What we're going to do now is put temperament on a clock. 12 equal notes in our modern scale. Eastern countries will divide it and have a quarter of a step. They'll have like a C sharp plus, or they'll make this one C sharp and the other one D flat. Who knows how they actually call the notes, but some tuning systems have as many as 24 notes in the scale. This one demonstrates equal temperament. Okay, we're going to put the color chart here on the right. This one I put in another slide, shows all of the equal temperament on the inside. Equal temperament would be like the numbers on the clock. So we've got 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Makes me want to sing the song Rock Around the Clock. So that's going through your mind right now, I did a good job. Okay, so let's take a look at the note from C to G, because remember, they always tuned everything in fifths. What they would do in equal temperament is the G is slightly flat. And I think they say 4 binaural beats flat from the perfect fifth. Whereas in just intonation, they made that perfect fifth it's pure. So C to G is pure. G to D is pure. Notice the equal temperament slightly lower. D to A is pure. Equal temperament is slightly lower. So the inside numbers are equal temperament. The outside are just. Now look what happens when we get to the note E. This would be, A to E, and they probably would, they're going to measure that. What I think they did here is they want to make sure that that major third is pure, which is quite a bit lower than it would be in equal temperament. All major thirds in equal temperament are sharp, but we've just become used to doing them that way. You're going to notice here from E to B, this B is definitely, these are all pure intervals. Then we now look at F sharp and G flat, C sharp and D flat, G sharp and A flat. They're on either side of what it would be an equal temperament, very much like what you're going to see in the Lucy Tune scale. One of them is going to be a higher pitch than the other. And they did this in early Baroque music because they wanted certain intervals more in tune than they wanted other intervals. Now we're going to take a look at this by the numbers. This is the nanometer equivalent of 760 nanometers is 22.422 hertz. I brought it down 44 octaves. If you want the next octave, just double it. All of the color spectrum is within 1 octave. So when you're doubling the color, it's just like doubling the octave. It's the same color. Here it's the same color of note, just an octave higher or an octave lower. So to get the octave of 22 hertz, you would multiply 22.422 times 2. And the reason I chose 432 here, it's the one concert pitch that seemed to match the nanometers when I was doing every 5 nanometers and moved it down 44 octaves. And the A432 concert pitch was the only one that was pretty much right on the money with, the 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, all the way up. All the other concert pitches are going to be somewhere in between that 5 nanometer difference. You're going to notice in equal temperament, the F is 21.43 hertz. In modified just is 21.33. Very minimal of a difference, but this F is lower than this F. In equal temperament, F sharp / G flat is going to be 22.7 hertz. In modified just, it's 0.78. Very minimal. This is going to be a little higher. G, 24.05 here, 24. This one is lower than this one. Modified just is lower than equal temperament. Look at G sharp or A flat, 25.48 versus 25.63. This one is higher. This is the widest distance between an equal temperament and a just. A is exactly the same. Now you ask, why is that? Well, we tune to A. If it was the note C, then C would be the same. It would be the same in both equal temperament and modified just. And then all of these numbers would be slightly different, but close enough. A sharp and B flat. This one, equal temperament, is higher than modified just. That means this one is lowered enough, not a lot, 0.2 something difference. I'd have to do the math in my head. Is not that much. Then B, 30.31 in equal temperament, 30.38. That's 0.07 difference, which is not much. You look all the way up here. The only one that's slightly flat or is not quite, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. I accidentally touched something I didn't want to. This one is actually supposed to be closer to this 36.25. And here it's 36, but you can see it's pretty close. These 36.04 and 36.00, I say it's a bit flat because it's further enough, it's further away from the nanometer equivalent. All of the others, as you'll notice, fit really close. Well, I just thought that was interesting. So here we are, 38.18 for the D sharp / E flat and 38.44. The ones that are going to have the widest differences are the sharps and flats. I'm sure you've noticed that by now. And then we go to 40.45 for equal tempered E and a 40.50 for the just. These are so close that most people, unless they're trained and spend in a really good discerners of pitch, are not going to audibly hear the difference between these pitches, between equal temperament and modified just. Now, if you're looking at the two of them on a ruler, at first glance, they look pretty darn close. You're going to notice the A sharp and B flat's higher. The A is higher. Almost all of the pitches, except for the F, this one's slightly lower. The E is slightly lower. The D sharp is barely lower. The D is lower. The C sharp is higher. And the C is also lower here. These are all equal distance. These have varying distances. This is wider, whereas this is closer together. And all of it is based on which key signatures does the composer want to have more dissonance to create more color that creates tension and release in the music. That's what it boils down to. The moral of this story is temperament was based on personal preference until the Industrial Revolution. That was the 1800s. Concert pitch was based on personal preference until it was standardized in the 1930s. There were many countries that were using 440 before the 1930s, and I can safely say that because I have one clarinet that was made in the early 1900s, like 1910, that's in 440 concert pitch. So we know that some countries were using it. What this did was now said that every country, we're going to standardize close to that. Most of them are 440, 439, 442, 444. They're all going to be somewhere around there, and most modern instruments can make those adjustments with the exception of pianos. Based on bands of colors, notes can have between 13 to 28 variations. And if you look at the color spectrum, the blue categories are, there's more in the blue category, so they're going to have larger distances and they're going to have more varieties of color. Just like color choices for artists, musical pitch choices by composers and performers color the music through dissonance and consonants. It's just like me taking this scarf and changing a color that's out of this palette. We're going to pretend like that my scarf is in the concert pitch of 432, and every one of these notes works really nicely and complements each other because these are kind of a warm tone. So we'll just pretend like warm tones are A432, and all of these colors work really well, but not all of them are going to be perfect. And let's say I want a little bit, I want a cool tone for my E or my G sharp. You're going to be adding a little bit of dissonance in there. Dissonance is as important as consonance in music. And this is really important that we understand this. This is how early composers created drama in their music, is through dissonance. If all colors are useful to us, why can't all variations in musical notes also be of benefit? Music and painting began from a place of intuition. This includes choices of pitches and colors. There is no proof that pitch or tuning were destroyed by changing concert pitch or temperament over time. We have plenty of historical artifacts, keyboards, tuning forks, church bells, church organs, etc., that show a variety of ways that instruments were tuned. Because music is very much intuitive, that's interpretation, creation of doing it. Even if you're moving to music, everyone's going to move to music differently because they're going to interpret that movement differently. So the most important factor in the creative process of music is the intent, which I believe is important for everything. Which leads me to say there is no credible evidence that modern tunings are harmful. And I say, as a classical musician, I have been playing an A440 my entire life. And last time I checked, there's nothing wrong with me. Here's some lessons that we can learn from color. Everyone has a favorite color palette. You all have colors that you like better than others. Therefore, everyone has a variety of musical tastes as well. And why do we have musical tastes that are different? Because no two people are alike. I'm not like you. You're not like me. And I'm sorry, I'll be myself. Thank you very much. Which means choose music that feels good to you. Well, how do you do that? Music that speaks, so this is the first thing I say, speaks negativity, elicits the a similar behavior. We become what we put our attention to. Musical intent is very important. How do you determine musical intent? The lyrics in songs have more of an effect on our psyche than the notes within the music itself. So think about that. When you're listening to songs with lyrics, think about the most popular rap songs. Think about some of the heavy metal songs. Go back and actually read the lyrics. You will know the intent. Lyrics determine intent. An example, many hymns that we love to sing were originally bar songs. They had, they were bar tunes. A lot of people don't know that, but it is the truth. Words were changed to reflect a drinking from a different source. I'll let you marinate in that one for a minute. Once we latch on to the importance of intent, we can change how we respond to and interact with music. Intent, intent, intent. You know how they say about real estate? Location, location, location. Everything about music, it's intent, intent, intent. So some conclusions that we can draw from this. How we use something, music, power tools, everyday household items, are in themselves not bad. I'm going to give you an example. The intent behind how stuff is used determines its harmfulness. Knives. I use knives every day in my kitchen. I have a really great knife set that is specific for cooking. Some hunters have awesome hunting knives. Woodworkers use different knives. There are knives for a variety of purposes, but knives, as we know, can be used to cause harm with an incorrect intent. This is showing the knife itself, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the intent behind it that causes the problem, if there's going to be a problem. Therefore, all musical notes, keys, modes, and all colors were given to us by the divine creator for our individual creative life journeys. Think about that. Therefore, just because someone says certain instrumental music or tuning is bad for you, don't believe them. If you like it, it feels good to you, it makes you feel all warm and fuzzy all over, then there's nothing wrong with it. Use intent to reframe the music if you like it, but don't know where it came from. Let me read that again. So we're using intent to reframe the music that you're not familiar with who created it. If you like it, but you're not sure where the intent is, then reframe it. What do you want it to be intended for? But if the music has lyrics, the intent is obvious. Listen to the lyrics. If things are presented that invoke feelings of fear, look for the negative intent behind what's being said. So far, everybody that has come up to me and said, A440 is really harmful. They detuned, blah, 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 blah. Every person that has said that to me has been fearful. If someone has gone up to you and said, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, and all of a sudden you have something rise up within you that's fearful, then just say no to that negativity. Just because someone told that to you doesn't mean it's truth. Find out for yourself. Do you like that thing? Do you like the music? Before you knew anything about A440, did it bother you? Probably not. So be very careful where the information is coming from. And when someone says something to you, if there is a sense of fear that you're feeling, then immediately where'd that fear come from? And lastly, on this, I have lots of blog posts about all of these topics on healingfrequenciesmusic.com. And I encourage you to go there, check out the blogs, many on the ancient solfegial frequencies, which, everyone's heard me. I don't have a problem if people want to use them, but the history behind them is completely inaccurate. And most of the information that I hear about them is saying how harmful what we're using, our standard now, is for us. When they're saying that what you're doing is harmful and this is better, then it's time to check out why they're saying that. And I'm going to stop sharing now and finish this off so you can actually see my cute little face again and my wonderful scarf that has all these beautiful colors that match my face, that are specific to me and my color palette. Just like the notes and the tunings that you use as a musician are going to work with your tonal color palette, just like your color palette, your visual color palette. How many people can wear yellow and get away with it, or orange? Not a lot of people. As a musician, I wore a lot of black, concert black. It was required. We have things that work individually for us that are very different than it is going to be for other people. And I can take other colors and put them up next to my face, and they're going to look awful on me because they don't match what's within me. Keep that in mind when listening to music and choosing music, that just because one person says it's harmful doesn't mean it's going to be harmful for you. On the other hand, we want to choose music that doesn't have negative lyrics, that does not put people down or people groups down, or is born out of anger or frustration, because those cause frequencies of despair, anxiety, and fear. And those frequencies settle into our body and cause problems. We want to listen to music that brings us joy, that brings us peace, relaxation, and that helps us to function in the what I call stronger frequencies, which a lot of people consider higher frequencies. We want to resonate with stronger frequencies that bring us into more love, joy, peace, kindness. Those are the things that are going to bring healing to our entire body, soul, and spirit. We'll see you in the next installment.